The morning my daughter-in-law Dana changed the code on my late husband Walter's workshop, she was smiling. I watched from the window of the guest house. My guest house now, as she punched in the new numbers, tested the handle, and walked back toward the main house without once looking in my direction. That was the detail that stayed with me, not the act itself. The fact that she didn't feel the need to hide it. Walter had built that workshop with his own hands 36 years ago. It stood at the back of our property in Elora, Ontario, a long timber frame building with a cedar roof and 2 windows that faced east so the morning light could come in. Inside, his woodworking tools, his hand-sketched plans, the letters he wrote me the winter he was sick, the ones he said were just in case. I had gone into that workshop every week since he died. I had never needed permission. Now I did. Before I tell you what I found when I finally got back inside, I want you to understand what that building meant to us, what this whole property meant. Because what Dana was trying to take wasn't just land. It was 36 years of a life that 2 people built together, 1 season at a time. Walter and I moved to Elora in 1988. Our son Andrew was 3 years old. We bought the property on the edge of town. 4 acres, an old farmhouse, and a barn that had already half collapsed. Walter looked at the barn and said we'd tear it down and use the lumber. I looked at the farmhouse and said the kitchen ceiling was going to fall on someone. We laughed and signed the papers anyway. The first few years were hard in the quiet way that hard things are when you're young and don't realize what they'll cost you later. Walter worked as a Finnish carpenter and I taught 3rd grade at Elora Public School. We fixed one thing, then the next, then the next. Walter used the barn lumber to build raised garden beds, then a fence, then, slowly, over 3 winters, the workshop. He designed it himself on graph paper at the kitchen's table, erasing and redrawing until Andrew laughed at him for it. When Andrew started school, Walter planted an apple orchard at the far edge of the property. 12 trees. He said Andrew would be eating apples from them before he finished high school. He was right. That orchard became the heart of the property in a way the house never quite was. Every September we picked and pressed the apples and made cider in the workshop. Neighbors came, friends came. My parents drove up from Guelph for it every year until they couldn't anymore. Andrew grew up carrying apple crates and pretending to complain. There are photographs somewhere. Him at 6 years old, arms barely reaching the lowest branch, looking up like he owned the whole sky. Walter died 5 years ago. Cardiac arrest, very early on a February morning, before the sun came up. He was 68 years old. There is nothing I can say about that hasn't already been said by people who've lost the person they built everything with. You just live in the fact of it, and eventually you learn how. Andrew started visiting more after that. He had married my daughter-in-law Dana 4 years before before Walter died, and they were renting a place in Guelph. He began making the drive to Elora on weekends, checking on the house, sitting with me at the kitchen table the way his father used to. That spring, he brought up the idea carefully, the way you do when you've been rehearsing something. "Mom, this house is too much for you alone," he said. "Dana and I could move in. You'd have company. We could take care of things." My daughter-in-law Dana sat across from me and took my hand. "You've given us so much," she said. "Let us give something back." I want to be clear. I believed her. Not because I was naive, because she said it in a way that sounded like it cost her something. And that's the kind of thing you believe. We converted the old guest house at the edge of the orchard into a proper living space for me. A small kitchen, a sitting room, my own entrance. Andrew did most of the work himself. Dana helped me choose curtains. The week I moved in, she brought over a casserole and a bottle of wine, and we sat on the porch until it was dark. I handed my son Andrew the house keys. I did not transfer the property. I never signed anything. At the time, I told myself that was just common sense. Later, I understood it was something Walter had made sure of, long before he died. The first months were good. Dana walked through the orchard with me on weekends. She asked questions. She seemed genuinely curious. But there was something in the questions, something I noticed but told myself I was reading wrong. She never asked about the trees themselves, about the varieties Walter had chosen, about which years were good and which were hard. She asked about the land. How many acres exactly? Whether the municipal boundary ran along the fence or through the orchard, what the property would be worth if the zoning changed. I told myself she was practical. Some people are. Then the small changes started. Walter's tools disappeared from the garage. She had sold them at a neighborhood sale, she said, clearing space. His photographs came down from the hallway wall. A new sofa arrived that I didn't recognize. The Sunday dinners that had been our tradition for as long as Andrew could remember stopped, then started happening without me, then stopped altogether. When I tried to talk to my son Andrew about it, something always interrupted. Dana walking in. His phone ringing, a sudden urgency he needed to attend to. One afternoon I caught a piece of a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Dana was standing by the back fence talking to a woman I didn't recognize. "The orchard section is the valuable part," she was saying. "Once we sort out the details, this could move quickly." I stepped forward. "What details?" Dana turned, composed herself in half a second. "Just neighborhood things," she said. "You know how people are." I did not know how people are, but I was beginning to learn how Dana was. My granddaughter Zoe was 14 and sharp in the way that quiet children sometimes are. She noticed everything and said very little until she had something worth saying. She came to the guest house one Tuesday evening and sat at my kitchen table without taking off her coat. "Gran," she said, "I heard something." She had been upstairs when Dana was on the phone in the study. The door was partly open. She heard enough. Dana had said, "The orchard lot is what they want most." And she had said, "Once Andrew signs, we're done." My granddaughter Zoe looked at me. "What is she trying to sign?" I said I didn't know yet, but I understood exactly what it meant to hear "once Andrew signs." The survey stakes appeared the following week. Orange-tipped wooden pegs driven into the ground at the far edge of the orchard, spaced in a line that suggested someone had already decided where a boundary would go. I touched one, and it was freshly set. I counted 7 of them. No one had told me they were coming. 3 days after that, Dana changed the code on Walter's workshop. I found out when I went to get his hand plane. I had been meaning to repair a loose board on the guest house porch, something he would have done without being asked. I punched in the old code. Nothing. I tried it again. The keypad blinked red. I stood in front of that door in the September morning and understood exactly what had happened. I walked to the side of the building. Dana came from the back of the house. "There's a liability issue," she said before I could speak. "If you hurt yourself in there, it becomes a legal problem." "I have been going into that workshop for 30 years, I said. "I know." She tilted her head slightly. "But things are different now." I asked her to give me the new code. She said she'd bring me anything I needed from inside. I said, "That is my husband's workshop." She looked at me with an expression I had not seen before. Not unkind, exactly, just finished. "We're responsible for the property now," she said. "For your safety." I did not argue, not because I agreed, because I had already learned that arguing gave Dana what she needed, evidence that I was difficult, emotional, not thinking clearly. I went back to the guest house, and I started writing everything down. My old friend Janet Morrison had worked at the municipal records office in Center Wellington for 22 years before she retired. I drove to her house that evening without calling ahead. She took one look at me and put the kettle on. I told her about the survey stakes, the workshop, the conversation my granddaughter Zoe had overheard. Janet listened the way she always had, without interrupting, without offering comfort too early. When I finished, she said, "Go to the records office tomorrow. Request every filing tied to your property, recent activity, last 12 months. Can she do anything without my signature?" "Not legally," Janet said. "But that's a different question from whether she'll try." I went the next morning. When the clerk handed me the file, I carried it to a table in the corner and opened it the way you open something when you're afraid of what you'll find. There were 2 preliminary filings, both recent. Both listed my name. Both carried a signature that was shaped like mine but wasn't. The pressure was wrong. The spacing between letters was wrong. Someone had practiced it but hadn't gotten it exactly right. My hands were steady when I photographed every page. The steadiness surprised me. I called Janet from the parking lot. "They've already filed," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Then you need a lawyer. Today if possible." Walter had left a sealed letter tucked into the back of his insurance folder. I had found it 6 months after he died. It said only, "If you ever need legal help, call Susan Park. She knows everything. I trust her completely." I had not understood what he meant at the time. I had filed it away and not thought about it again until now. I called Susan Park that afternoon. She answered on the second ring, and within the hour I was sitting in her office in Fergus. Walter had been thorough in the way that people are when they've decided to protect someone they love. He was the sole owner at marriage, and he had structured everything carefully. The property, the estate plan, a conservation easement registered against the orchard that prevented subdivision or residential development without my explicit written consent and the agreement of the Ontario Land Trust Organization that held a co-interest. He had done this quietly without telling me, because he had not wanted me to worry. "She can't touch the orchard," Susan said. "She doesn't know that." "No," Susan said, "and that gives us an advantage. As long as she believes she's in control, she won't destroy evidence or change her approach." I told her about the meeting my granddaughter Zoe had overheard. About the signing Dana was planning. Susan looked at me carefully. "When?" "Saturday. Andrew gets back from a work trip Friday night." "Then we have until Saturday," she said. "Don't confront Dana yet. Let her keep believing everything is on track." On my way home, I turned down the lane that runs along the edge of St. Andrew's Presbyterian, the church where Walter and I had been members for 30 years. Reverend Alan Clark was raking leaves in the side yard. He waved when he saw my car. I told him what I needed. He went inside without asking me to explain further, and when he came back he was holding a small brass key on a plain ring. My husband Walter had given it to him 8 years ago. He had said to keep it safe, and to give it to me if I ever came asking for it. Reverend Clark had kept it in the same drawer all this time. "He said you'd know what it was for," Alan said. "I do now," I said. That evening, I used the key. Not the front door with the electronic lock. The original door Walter had installed on the side of the workshop before he added the keypad years later. He had never removed it. He had never mentioned it to Dana. The key turned cleanly in the old brass lock, smooth as if it had been used yesterday. Inside, Dana had arranged the space like a staging area. Boxes stacked along one wall, documents in folders. 2 sets of architectural drawings showing the orchard replaced with 8 townhomes and a shared driveway. My name on forms I had never seen. Copies of my personal documents, driver's license, property tax notices, things someone had gathered over months, carefully, piece by piece. And Walter's blue notebook, the one I had thought was lost. I sat on his old workbench stool and opened it. His handwriting was the same as it always was, neat, left-leaning, very him. "I don't feel right about Dana," he had written. "She asks about the property the way someone does when they're calculating something. Not curious. Measuring." I turned the page. "If I'm gone and things go wrong, she'll need someone on her side. She gives too much and trusts too quickly. I've made sure the land is protected. Susan Park has all of it." And then, on the last page, "If you're reading this, Vera, it means I was right to worry. Don't stay quiet about it. Silence is the only thing that could cost you this." I closed the notebook and sat there for a long time. Not crying, just understanding. I photographed everything. I did not remove a single document. I slipped out through the side door, locked it behind me, and walked back across the orchard in the dark. Friday night, my son Andrew's car pulled in just after 9. I was waiting. We sat at the guest house table. I showed him everything. The filings, the photographs, the development drawings, the forged signatures. I showed him his father's notebook. I watched him read it, page by page, in a silence that changed quality as he went. When he finished, he sat with it closed in his hands. "I've been seeing things in the bank accounts," he said quietly. "Things I couldn't explain. She kept saying it was investments." "It wasn't investments," I said. He looked up at me. His face was the face of a man who had been choosing not to know something, and had just run out of room to avoid it. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. "Don't sign anything," I said, "and show up Saturday." Saturday came clear and cool, the kind of September morning that makes Elora look like something from a painting. By 2 in the afternoon, Dana had set up tables on the back patio near the workshop. Chairs, documents, a catered tray. 3 men arrived in good coats. One of them I recognized from the survey stakes. A developer named Greg Halford. The others were likely his people. My son Andrew walked in through the front gate with my granddaughter Zoe beside him. Dana moved toward him immediately, touching his arm, steering him toward the table. "Everything's ready," she said. "This is just the last step." Andrew sat down. He looked at the documents in front of him. "Walk me through it again," he said. Dana began to explain. Refinancing, she called it, restructuring, a future for the family. I came through the side door of the workshop, crossed the yard, and stepped into the middle of it. Dana went very still. Greg Halford looked between us. "And you are?" "I'm the owner of this property," I said. "Every acre of it." I placed Susan Park's documents on the table. The deed, the estate records, the registered conservation easement. Susan herself stepped around the corner of the building, where she had been waiting. Greg Halford leaned forward and read. His expression changed. He looked at Dana. "You told me the owner had consented to all of this." Dana's voice stayed very controlled. "She has." "I haven't," I said. "And this signature on your preliminary filing is not mine." One of the other men, a lawyer, picked up the filing and examined it. Something shifted in the way he held it. "The orchard property," Susan said calmly, "is protected under a registered conservation easement. It cannot be subdivided or developed without the written consent of both the registered owner and the co-holding organization. My client has given no such consent. The preliminary filings carry a forged signature, which we are prepared to demonstrate." Greg Halford set down his pen. My granddaughter Zoe stepped forward. She took out her phone. She pressed play. Dana's voice came through the speaker, from a recording Zoe had made 2 weeks earlier, through a half-open door. "We need Andrew to sign before she figures out what's happening. She's already asking questions. Just give me until the weekend." Nobody spoke. Greg Halford stood up. "This deal is finished," he said, and he was speaking to his lawyers, not to Dana. Dana did not move for a long moment. Then she looked at Andrew. He shook his angry. "Just done." "I'm not signing," he said. What came after took months, not days. The investigation, the formal review of the forged documents, the process of unwinding the advance payment Dana had accepted from the developer without any authority to do so. It was slow and quiet and handled by people who knew how. I did not follow every detail. I understood enough. My son Andrew moved to a rental in town while he sorted through what his marriage had actually been. He came to the guest house most evenings. We did not always talk about what happened. Sometimes we sat on the porch with tea and watched the last of the season's apples drop from the trees, and that was enough. My granddaughter Zoe came every weekend. She helped me restake the garden beds Walter had built, the ones that had been neglected through the summer. She had his same patience. Careful, unhurried, unbothered by the work taking longer than expected. One afternoon, Andrew walked across the yard and stood in front of the workshop. The side door was propped open, letting in the October light. He stood there for a moment, then looked at me. "Do you want me to remove the keypad?" he asked. I thought about it. "Leave it," I said. "But reset the code to something we both know." He nodded. He understood. I did not want to forget what it had felt like to stand in front of a door in my own yard and not be able to open it. Not as bitterness, not as punishment. As a reminder that a home is not kept by ownership alone. It is kept by the willingness to stand in it, to say clearly, "This is mine, and I am still here." Walter had known that. He had built the protection into the foundation of this place long before I needed it. The easement, the lawyer's number, the spare key at the church, the notebook. He had done it quietly, the way he did everything that mattered. I had spent years believing that keeping the peace was the most important thing. That if I accommodated enough, stayed patient enough, caused enough people enough comfort, my family would remain whole. But peace that costs you yourself is not peace. It is just a slower kind of loss. I picked up Walter's handplane from the workbench. The loose board on the guest house porch was still waiting. I went to fix it.